Welcome to Wander Mode, a podcast that wanders through topics such as entrepreneurship, traveling, and mamahood. As a teacher turned entrepreneur and a mama to one, I am sharing my tips and tricks to maintain harmony in a multifaceted life. Let's wander. Veronica Stratton is a nutritionist, and she is sharing with us today an evidence-based approach to all things gut health. She practices a plant-based lifestyle and is currently developing a course to teach you how to leverage evidence-based nutrition and lifestyle strategies to overcome common gut health issues. She even has a free probiotic guide on her Instagram at PlantifullyWell.
It's really an honor to be on the show. I'm excited to talk to you about all things gut health. So I'm Veronica, and I'm a registered holistic nutritionist, and I live part-time in Mexico and part-time in New Zealand with my Kiwi partner. And my story as to how I came to be in this career is kind of a mix of my own personal experience with gut health issues and I guess my upbringing. My mom is a doctor, and I've always been around and exposed to the medical world. I've always been interested in it. I was introduced to the concept of a whole food plant-based diet fairly early on through my dear grandpa, who I'm still very close with. He is 93 years old now. And he first started eating a predominantly plant-based diet when he was, I think, around 60, so pretty much right around the time I was born, and he still does today. His main motivator at that time was to find a diet that was healthy, where he could eat a lot and also easily keep his weight down. I think he also had high cholesterol at the time, so he was trying to get that down. He happened to stumble across Dr. John McDougall, who is a pretty well-known advocate of a whole food plant-based diet. We started reading his books, and I guess he made a pretty compelling argument for a plant-based diet. And my grandpa started following that diet straight away. And it worked. He lost weight, his cholesterol went down, and he didn't have to do it hungry all the time. He stuck with it. Then I think it was about in 1998, Dr. McDougall started running these all-inclusive plant-based vacations in Costa Rica. All the food was whole food plant-based, and they organized daily activities like snorkeling and hiking and ziplining. And he would also do these educational lectures on plant-based diet and health. And I spent a lot of time with my grandparents as a kid. They would take me on tons of trips. So I started going on these trips to Costa Rica with them. On that first trip, I think I was about 8. I didn't even know it had anything to do with food. I just thought it was fun. I just thought, man, these pancakes taste kind of funny. But I think on around our 4th trip there, when I was about 12, I decided to start going to some of the lectures with my grandpa. My mind was just blown. It was so fascinating. I couldn't believe that I had never heard of any of this before, that my mom, who's a doctor, didn't know about it. So that sort of planted the seed in the back of my mind. And I didn't switch to a plant-based diet then. I actually had a pretty terrible diet growing up. Not terrible, but the standard American diet. I ate a lot of Pop-Tarts and goldfish. From there on, it was kind of always in the back of my mind. And then fast forward to about age 27, I had been interested in nutrition and health for a while at that point, and I slowly was starting to make the transition to a vegetarian diet for a while, and then vegan. I wouldn't say it was a whole food plant-based diet at that time, but it was starting to get there. I also started to realize how little my mom knew as a doctor about nutrition. Doctors get around 10 hours total, or maybe a few days worth of nutrition education. I was really starting to become interested and passionate about nutrition. Around that time, I decided to study to get my diploma in nutrition. I enrolled to study at the Canadian School of Natural Nutrition, which was a 2-year intensive program. And then it was about a year later, I was in Mexico and I got sick with Giardia, which is a stomach bug, followed by a pretty bad ear infection. And I had to take 2 rounds of back-to-back pretty strong antibiotics. And then it was shortly after that, maybe within 4 months or so, that I started to get some pretty bad GI symptoms. Lots of pain, bloating, gas, urgency. It was really starting to become debilitating and super uncomfortable. I didn't really know what was going on, but I just knew that there was definitely something wrong. I did what anyone would and should do, and I went to see a gastroenterologist, and I explained my symptoms. And eventually it was decided that I would need to have a colonoscopy, which is where they put a camera up your bum and look in your colon to see what's going on. And I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, which is inflammatory bowel disease that falls under the autoimmune umbrella. And luckily it was a pretty mild case. But I woke up after being sedated from this procedure, and the doctor was just like, yep, so you've got this inflammatory bowel disease and likely IBS too. You'll have to deal with this for the rest of your life. It might get worse. You'll experience flares in between remission, and here's some medication. And I asked about diet, of course, expecting that a gastroenterologist would surely know more about diet than my mom as a GP. And the gastro doc just said, yeah, diet doesn't really matter. Some people find that lactose-free milk helps. Maybe try that. Low fiber foods, and maybe try a low FODMAP diet. That was it. I was left feeling pretty scared about what the future held for me and how I was going to manage this new disease that I had. And this is not to say that gastroenterologists are not helpful. They absolutely are. They're incredibly knowledgeable, and they know far, far more about the GI system and how medications work than I ever will. Then I went to several gastroenterologists, and most of them, when I asked about diet, gave me some variation of that same answer that the first doctor said. Not one of them ever mentioned to me anything about the microbiome or how fiber in food might actually help. At that time, I was pretty well into nutrition, and I was still studying, and I just began to make it my mission to really understand what was going on and how what we eat affects our gut. And I did learn a lot through school, especially the foundations of nutrition, anatomy, and nutritional symptomatology. And I learned a bit about the microbiome as well. Like, there's good gut bugs and bad gut bugs, but not really a ton. And I just really dived into the clinical research after that around the microbiome and took some really great evidence-based courses on gut health and the microbiome after graduating. And focusing on that and diving into that really got me to the point of knowing what I know now. Although getting diagnosed with colitis sucked, and it's something that I will have to manage for the rest of my life, I'm actually just so grateful because it led me down this path to knowing what I know now, and I now have the knowledge and ability to not only know how to manage my illness the best I can with diet and lifestyle, but it also led me down this path to learn how to help other women that are dealing with other gut health issues or similar ones who feel like they maybe have been dismissed and failed by conventional medicine alone.
I was also very close with one of my grandparents. And one of the things that I appreciate about the multi-generational family structure is how much we can learn from those people that are living their lives a long time before we come along. And before I ask you to give a little bit about the what of gut health, like how it works and some of those basic components, I'm curious, because you're still so close with your grandpa, has he ever said anything about following this lifestyle? Was it easier at a certain point in his life? Has it been harder to live that lifestyle?
I think with him, he hasn't really made it this huge deal. Back when he started, I think it was around 1990, it really was not as common as it is now. He took a pretty flexible approach with it. At home, he was eating a whole food plant-based diet. But when he would go out to eat with friends, he would eat meat and cheese like normal diet. But that was kind of the 5 to 10% of the time. 90% of his diet was at home eating that whole food plant-based diet. I think it was difficult for him from a social perspective, but he just kind of took more of a flexible approach with it.
When you really think about that, just because we go out to dinner with our friends and have that piece of meat, that it doesn't mean that we've completely thrown out the baby with the bathwater kind of thing. It doesn't always have to be like an all or nothing.
A lot of people get really scared about the label of it. Like, oh, I can never be vegan. Well, it can be a lot more fluid than that. You don't have to label yourself into this one little box and stick to that for the rest of your life. It's what you do most of the time that matters the most.
So tell us a little bit about this evidence-based approach. I understand that it's way more information than you're going to be able to give us on the interview today, but from a broad overview perspective, what is gut health?
I think to answer that question, it might be sort of helpful to break down and define, like you said, what gut health actually is, because gut health is definitely one of those buzzword terms that we hear all the time now. It's just an area of research that has really just exploded over the last 5 to 10 years. There's new studies coming out nearly every week around the microbiome. When you hear the term gut health, what we're actually referring to is the gut microbiota, or what is generally known as the gut microbiome. And the microbiome is this expansive community of about 38 trillion microorganisms that live on and inside our whole bodies. They cover our skin, our mouth, our vagina, they carpet our organs, but most of them are going to be found in our gut. specifically our large intestine, which is also known as the colon. So 38 trillion is a pretty hard number to wrap our heads around. To put that number into perspective, it's actually more than the number of human cells in our body, which means that we are more bacteria than we are human. Also about 100 times the amount of stars that there are in the Milky Way, which is a huge number. It's pretty wild. And we have evolved to rely really, really heavily on these microbes. We literally cannot live without our microbiome. We can live without a kidney or appendix, but not without a microbiome. These bacteria are really important, and we have evolved to outsource a lot of the body's functions to them. Different types of these bacteria have different roles in our bodies. For example, some of them produce certain vitamins like vitamin K and various B vitamins. A lot of them help break down our food. Those bacteria produce over 30,000 enzymes that help break down fiber. And some of them are involved in the immune system. Actually, 70% of your immune system resides in the gut. And there is a direct line between the health of the immune system and the health of the gut. That's why autoimmune diseases, we're finding out now, have a connection to a history of a damaged microbiome. Just like myself with ulcerative colitis, it's pretty fascinating, actually. Some of them help process hormones. There is a specific group of bacteria in the gut called the estrobolome that helps regulate our hormone levels. They connect with the brain via the enteric nervous system, which is often referred to as the second brain, which you might have heard of before. And the enteric nervous system is comprised of over 100 million neurons that connect the gut directly to your brain. They're in constant communication. 90% of serotonin, that feel-good, happy neurotransmitter, is produced in the gut. In fact, there are over 30 neurotransmitters produced in the gut. It has a huge impact on mood and mental health and vice versa. I mean, I could go on and on. It really is hard to find an aspect of our physiology, of our bodies, that is not in some way connected to the gut. So you have all of these different bacteria playing all these different important roles within the body. And as you can imagine, you want a diverse and robust microbiome. The more diverse you can get your microbiome, the more resilient your gut and in turn your body and your health will be. Just like in nature, right? A diverse ecosystem full of different types of animals, insects, plants, and trees is a thriving and healthy ecosystem. And we're the same. I think it's such a beautiful reminder that we are so intrinsically connected to nature and that the rules of nature also apply to us, like even down to a microscopic level. A healthy gut means when those bacteria are balanced and diverse and they're all doing their jobs in our body. And a quote unquote unhealthy gut refers to usually some form of what's called dysbiosis, which just means that there's an imbalance in that bacterial composition of the good gut bugs to bad inflammatory ones. And dysbiosis can lead to intestinal permeability or leaky gut. Leaky gut is linked to all sorts of health issues like IBS, inflammatory bowel disease, food sensitivities. That's kind of a quick description of what unhealthy gut means. So there's different contributing factors that play a role in dysbiosis, like stress, our environment, medications, but mostly it comes down and is influenced by what we eat. And the way that we support a diverse and resilient microbiome through our diet is by feeding these beneficial bacteria what they need to thrive. Just like you and I need food to survive, so do our gut microbes. And their food source to survive happens to be fiber, which is only found in plant foods. And each different type of plant food contains a different type of fiber and feeds different types of beneficial bacteria. That's why a diverse diet rich in plant foods is so important for a healthy gut microbiome. And we now know that the number one predictor of a healthy gut microbiome is diversity of plants in the diet. And this is thanks to the largest study published to date on the human microbiome, which was done by the American Gut Project, I think in 2018. And they looked at samples of poop over a period of time from over 11,000 participants, and they evaluated their lifestyle and their eating habits. And what they found was that those who consumed 30 or more different plants each week had the most diverse microbiomes. What also happens when our gut bacteria break down and ferment the fiber in plant foods is that they produce something called short-chain fatty acids. And short-chain fatty acids are like the real superheroes of gut health. There are 3 of them. There's butyrate, acetate, and propionate, and they have incredible anti-inflammatory and healing effects throughout the entire body. But right there in the gut. They get to work by helping to repair leaky gut by activating the cells of our intestinal walls. They also help to prevent colon cancer right there in the colon and suppress inflammatory bacteria. These short-chain fatty acids that are produced by consuming plant foods are like the real MVPs of gut health, and they have tremendous benefits throughout the body. And then on the other side of the coin, unhealthy foods that feed unhealthy and inflammatory bacteria can shift the microbiome out of balance and into that state of dysbiosis. We want to be prioritizing plant foods, and that's why I love the term plant-forward diet and just focusing on that abundance of whole plant foods that will sort of naturally crowd out the other stuff and shift your microbiome. The evidence definitely points toward a plant-predominant diet for a healthy gut and overall health.
That makes so much sense. It just, as we're unique and there are different aspects in nature that are unique, that we have to feed ourselves in different ways depending on our particular situation. First, the study that had 11,000 participants and they went through the poop, I would never want to be on that end of research. I mean, I'm sure they find that fascinating, but also just being a mom of one, and we're kind of through the diaper phase. Like, I'm so over analyzing poop, cleaning poop, whatever. So I had to really chuckle at that. So you commented they found that people who ate 30 plus diverse plants in a week had the healthiest microbiome. Can you tell me, if we can't go from 0 to 30 in a week, right? What would you say would be like the top 5 if you really wanted to start shifting that gut? What would those be? The ones that pack the most punch?
I'd like to first start off with, you'd be surprised at how quickly 30 plants add up. It's including, herbs and spices, grains, beans, not just like your leafy greens that you think of when you think of plant foods. I would recommend that you start counting your own plant foods, and you might be surprised at how quickly that adds up. Some of the best ones to focus on when it comes to feeding your gut microbiome are going to be those foods that are rich in higher in soluble fiber than insoluble fiber. So that includes whole grains, beans, and then also resistant starch, potatoes, sweet potatoes, pumpkin, those sorts of foods would probably be my number one. And then also cruciferous vegetables, broccoli, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, kale. They are great at producing one of those short-chain fatty acids, which is butyrate.
Now, I feel like we've heard a lot in recent years about organic vegetables and fruits and things and non-GMOs. How does that change this plant-based eating aspect?
Yeah, so I would always encourage people, if they can financially and if they have access to it, to purchase organic vegetables, because those pesticides that are designed to kill bacteria and bugs can have an effect on our gut microbiome and killing off bacteria. Of course, it's in a lot smaller amounts than, say, if you're working on the farm itself. But it's not something that I would say that you need to be overly worried about. Like, do not just avoid eating plants because you don't have access to organic foods. If you have the means to and you can, then yes, buy organic, and that will help ensure that it's a non-GMO as well. But if you can't, then just eat the diversity of plants. That's the main thing that I want people to focus on. Just eating those plants. If you can, buy organic, buy local, but if not, then eat your plants.
That sounds easy peasy. Like, just eat the plants. I love anything that's like simple and straightforward. Just eat what comes from the earth. Share a little bit about what are some signs or symptoms that a person might see or experience when their microbiome is a little bit off.
Yeah, so the symptoms can be really varied, as you can imagine, because the microbiome plays such a big role in so many different parts of our body. But some common ones that I see are increased food sensitivities, because if you are not eating some of those plant foods, your microbiome's ability to break down those plant foods is going to be reduced. And so you might be experiencing increased food sensitivities, low energy, anxiety, mood issues because of that gut-brain connection, constipation or motility issues around bowel movements is a really common one, gas, bloating, that type of thing. Even PMS due to the gut's ability to regulate hormones. And as far as timing as to how long it takes to remedy and fix these, it just sort of depends on where someone's at and how badly damaged their gut microbiome is. It's kind of hard to put an exact timeline on it, but you can start seeing improvements even a couple weeks into switching to a more plant-predominant diet. Sometimes it takes up to 6 months, I would say, but anywhere from that few weeks' time to around 6 months.
It would definitely be more of a patience process.
It's the long game. Just like anything in health, it's kind of boring, but it's that long game.
Now, with women in particular, do you find that there are other things that we can do in addition to plant-based eating that help further assist that plant-based diet?
I think stress is a big one. We worry a lot, we stress a lot. And due to that gut-brain connection, that definitely impacts our gut microbiome. It can influence the beneficial bacteria that we have in our gut. So working on managing stress in particular is a huge one for women, focusing on sleep and working with our circadian rhythm. One of the things that I encourage people to do is first thing in the morning, get outside, get some light in your eyes. That helps to regulate your circadian rhythm. And our circadian rhythm is also closely connected to our gastrointestinal system. That helps to regulate our digestion as well. Another thing that I encourage people to do is box breathing or diaphragmatic breathing before they eat. We cannot digest in a stressed out state. One of the things that I encourage women to do is just take a moment before eating and just take a few deep breaths, breathing into your belly, exhaling, and then that helps to engage the parasympathetic nervous system and allows us to digest our food properly. Because I think especially women are kind of always on the go and also eat on the go, and that has a domino effect on our health and our gut health. So that's one thing that I would encourage. And then also with diet, it always comes down to the overall dietary pattern, including when it comes to women's health. So what you're eating most of the time on a day-to-day basis, focusing on that diversity of plant foods like we talked about. But the gut really does play a big role in processing and regulating hormones. And there is a collection of bacteria in the gut called the estrobolome, I think I mentioned earlier. And this collection of bacteria, the estrobolome, helps to sort of act as a gatekeeper for helping to keep circulating estrogen and hormones at optimum levels. When you have a damaged gut microbiome, it can lead to hormonal imbalances, often too much estrogen, and higher or imbalanced estrogen levels associated with all the conditions that women commonly experience, such as endometriosis, PMS, irregular periods, fibroids, breast tenderness. That's that overall dietary pattern to support gut health, including lots of plants, but there's definitely a few foods in particular that stand out for women's health. Cruciferous vegetables can be really helpful for women in this way. They help to support the liver, and they contain a compound that helps to metabolize estrogen. So that's foods like broccoli, cabbage, kale, Brussels sprouts. I love broccoli sprouts for this. You can sprout them at home in a jar. They're super cheap and easy, and you can add them to smoothies or salads. And then also soybeans and soy products like tempeh, tofu, and soy milk are super beneficial for women. That's because soy contains a form of estrogen called phytoestrogen, which is actually a lot weaker than mammalian estrogen. Mammalian estrogen is what we have in our bodies, and you also find it in dairy and animal products. But phytoestrogen can actually have a hormonal balancing effect, so that can be super beneficial, especially for menopausal symptoms like hot flashes. Perimenopausal and menopausal women could definitely benefit from soy. Flax seeds as well, which are high in lignans, have a similar effect, and they've actually been shown in clinical trials to help reduce premenstrual breast tenderness. Smoothies are great for that, and ginger. Ginger is amazing for PMS. It has actually been shown to be as effective as non-steroidal anti-inflammatories like Motrin and ibuprofen.
Those are all really good ideas. The thing that I love about what you're sharing is that it all seems really manageable. Those are all terms or words or plant-based things that I'm familiar with. Now, as far as the availability of information, would you say that the plant-based approach is pretty straightforward? If someone were to go jump online, everyone who's kind of in the plant-based situation is saying fairly similar things, or are there certain pieces of advice that you probably wouldn't want to steer yourself toward?
The internet is a wild place, especially when it comes to nutrition. It is certainly a minefield. There's a ton of misinformation out there, including in the plant-based world. There's a ton of misinformation around soy and that it has a type of estrogen and that can have negative effects. I guess just paying attention to who you're listening to and where they're getting their information from. So anyone that's telling you to cut out certain plants forever, that's a pretty big red flag, because with gut health and plant-based eating in particular, it's about radical abundance of including lots of different plants. We don't ever want to be eliminating whole groups of plant foods forever. That's a big red flag. Anyone that's telling you to cut out whole grains or beans or that type of thing. Yeah, I guess that's the main one that I would think of, and just encouraging people to dive a little bit deeper as to where certain people are getting their sources from, where they're getting their information from, making sure that it actually is evidence-based. And I'm all for anyone that's leaning on the evidence.
Like you said, the internet is full of all sorts of misinformation, and anytime that you are listening to or reading somebody who's being extreme on one or the other of the spectrum should probably give you a red flag for sure. Now, you are coming out with a course that is going to teach us about all things gut health. Tell us about your course, who it's for. Is it online?
I currently work with one-on-one clients as well, and I am in the process of creating my own program for people that might not have the ability to pay for one-on-one coaching. It kind of takes people through that same step-by-step process, especially for women or people that are experiencing gut health issues and feel like they have tons of food sensitivities, and they understand that including more plants is good, but they just feel like they're reacting to everything. There is a strategy and step-by-step process to slowly move through this to get to that point where you're including tons of plants and you have great gut health. It's for people that want to learn more about it and just want to be guided through the step-by-step process. Anyone that's dealing with things like gas and bloating, motility issues like constipation, food sensitivities, IBS, that sort of thing. And then also for anyone that just wants to learn more about how they can best optimize their diet to support a healthy gut microbiome and overall health. And I'll be offering one-on-one sessions throughout the course every other week. So people have access to me and I'll be there to help guide them and overcome things. It's also going to go at your own pace. People might go through it quite quickly or take longer than 12 weeks, but ideally around 12 weeks.
I feel like that's a good amount of time to get started, change your habits, change your practice, have access to you for questions. You're really on a solid footing moving forward with like a plan.
Yeah, totally. And then there's always the option, if they feel like they need more guidance after that 3 months, to work with me further one-on-one. But it really sets them up with a foundation to really understand and change their health and change their life.
Well, I want to end with this question because I think often people view lifestyle changes as being really difficult. In your opinion, would you say that it is easy to maintain this lifestyle?
Honestly, I find it quite easy. I mean, it didn't happen overnight. And I think that people have to kind of remember that it's a change that's going to take time. And I always recommend that you start small. Start with one meal. Start with breakfast. It's really easy to swap out, say, your eggs for a tofu scramble or for oatmeal and smoothies. I feel so freaking good. And I also am able to manage my own illness this way. And I'm also not hungry all the time. Like, I have an appetite. I like to eat. And years ago, when I didn't really fully understand this way of eating, I tried different diets to maintain my weight, and it was often really a struggle. But since eating this way, it's just so easy to maintain my weight and not be hungry and feel good. Also, restaurants and navigating through the world now, it's a lot more accommodating to plant-based eating. I find it pretty easy at most restaurants to always find something that I can eat. And like I was saying earlier, it doesn't have to be a all or nothing approach.
Such a fascinating topic, and I really appreciate you being on with me today to share all of this information. If someone wanted to find you, where is the best place to reach out?
People can find me on my Instagram, and that's Plantifully Well. I also have TikTok and YouTube, and they can also find me on my website at plantifullywell.com. So that's PLANTIFULLY.
And I would share that even if you're not ready to commit to consulting or a course, Veronica shares so much interesting information just on Instagram alone. I'm not on TikTok, but just even on Instagram. Well, thank you so much. And until next time, wander on. If you wandered to this point in the episode, thank you for listening to the Wander Mode podcast. Please leave a review and subscribe. You can follow me on Instagram and Facebook at WanderModeCo. Reach me by email at julie@wandermode.co.